Can everyone see us? Okay. Okay, so last autumn we took Jacob on as our families and young persons worker. I think Jacob probably had every major life transition in the space of 12 months maybe or less. So quite a time of transition for you guys. I know that some of the folk here will have known you from when you were part of the church before you went to Wales. Some of you perhaps not know you that well. And so first of all, could you maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself, and maybe about your background, families, any hobbies, interests that you have as well?
Yeah, happily. Jacob Taylor. I imagine a lot of you might potentially know or know of my folks. Andy and Kath Taylor, they work at LL Ministries just down the road a little bit. And so, yeah, that's, we've moved around loads when we were growing up as a result of that. We were in Australia for a little bit when I was younger, and then spent 9 years in Florida as well. So really only properly started at this church 2014, I think it was, when I was about 16 or so. And then after that, if you were around then, I would have been back there, probably looking incredibly sleepy because I worked at the newsagents and then used to come to church straight afterwards. I actually remembered, I think your first service here, or sermon here, was an evening service, and I fell asleep. Because I remember being mortified and thinking, if I ever need a job from this guy, he's never going to give it me. But no, I'd been knackered, and it got to the prayer at the end, and it must have just been a bit of a long prayer, because next thing I know, I'm getting nudged because I haven't put the words up on the screen.
You're not the first, you won't be the last, Jacob.
But yeah, I like board games is sort of my big hobby. I've got a whole cupboard under the stairs full of board games that I filled up, which I think Rach is hoping that one day will be a more useful space in the house. But that's my big love. I love sitting around a table with people and playing a game of some kind. Anything but Monopoly is sort of the big one for me. Not a fan of Monopoly. Yeah.
Great. Do you want to tell us about Rachel and the twins?
Oh yes, I've got a wife, and she's lovely. She's very good. Don't tell her I forgot. Yeah, Rachel, she originally from Scotland, and we met working in Wales. So after I was here for a little while, I was here all through university, got a degree in history, all fired up with a master's specifically designed to help me get a job working in museum collections and looking after artifacts and all that sort of stuff. And I graduated in 2020 and all the museums shut, so that didn't happen. And instead I ended up in pretty much right in the middle of Wales, right on the coast, working at an outdoor centre. So having kids come or families come, and we'd do rock climbing and canoeing and kayaking and archery and all those sort of activities with them, which was great fun. And I, Adam there, my mate, we met working there, and first year we were there, I was telling him, I'd love to get married one day, but what are the chances I'm going to get married to someone that I meet here, because, it's such a small staff team and all that. And anyway, then I met Rachel. She came to be the housekeeper where I was working, and yeah, rest is history. We got married while we were still living in Wales, and then moved here just in time to have twins. So it's a very busy house at the moment.
And the twins were born about the same time that you started the job here, is that right?
I did 2 weeks here, and then the twins came. So, yes, busy. Elijah and Ren, who are about 10 months old now, nearly, and who you probably hear from sort of that bit over there squawking during the morning service, because it's their favourite thing at the minute is just to make noise.
It's great to hear them. So you mentioned that your parents are Andy and Kath Taylor, who run LL, so you obviously grew up in a Christian family. How did faith become personal for you? How did you come to faith?
So the church I was at in the States had a very, very big children's work, and I'd been through all of that, and I was in the youth group there, and they would do big sort of summer camps in the summer. They'd go off and sort of meet up with other churches, and we'd hire out an entire hotel or something like that, or we'd hire out I think we hired out a university once, just because how many churches were all coming together. And I think for me, certainly at that age, those were the moments when my faith felt the most real to me, when I was away from the rest of my family and I was somewhere new, and I guess, surrounded by all these other kids, and having to really, decide how do I want to act. And so I remember those were really influential for me. But what I found was that every year I went, I'd feel really, maybe paranoid. Paranoid's not quite the word, perhaps, but I felt really worried that I hadn't done it right. I felt like every single year I was making a commitment and going to the front and all of this. I think, just because I felt like it was only at those moments that it all felt real, and so maybe I was doing something wrong when I was at home and that sort of thing. And I remember there was just one summer camp where that evening everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong. I think the fire alarm went off and they had to get everyone out of the meeting room, and then we all came back in, and then the power went out right as we were about to do worship, and so we were all doing worship in the dark with no lyrics, and just everything went wrong. But I remember that the talk really impacted me and sort of spoke exactly into how I was feeling, and that encouragement that, that camp high that you can feel when you're on a summer camp is a thing, and that, having that bit of a dip when you come back is normal, but also that the more that you're putting into your own sort of walk with God, the less of a up and down it might be. And so I sort of committed myself afresh, this time just in my own heart. And that was kind of it. I never had those worries again, and it sort of felt like that was when I'd properly decided, you know what, I want this to change the way that I live all the time in a more real way. So.
Cool. That's great. So, as a teenager then, how did you find being a Christian, and kind of what helped you to develop in your faith in those years?
I think I found it really good in a way. I looking back, I can see just how valuable my church was, and the youth work and all of that sort of stuff, because of the quirks of where we were living when I was in Florida. It was I never spent more than, I think, 3 years at a school, so I was constantly moving to different schools this different school system and all that sort of thing. And every time I moved school, it was entirely new people. And so, and with having moved around loads, I think I'd gotten quite used to sort of starting afresh every couple of years and that sort of thing, and having friendships, but fairly shallow friendships. Whereas church was the same all through those 9 years. And so that really felt to me like, okay, this is my place where I am safe almost. I'm surrounded by people that I know quite well, they know me quite well. And that was really helpful to me. And I think a lot of what we were doing there just encouraged us to be willing to what am I trying to say here? When I was looking at the Bible by myself, I think I would sometimes get a bit worried that I was getting it wrong, or maybe I misunderstood this, or maybe I don't really understand this, and I feel like who can I ask about this to sort of explain it? And I found that community I had at the church was really helpful, because when we'd meet up and we'd study the Bible, I was surrounded by people that were in the same boat as me, and so I didn't worry about asking silly questions, because everyone's asking questions, and we're all trying to get deeper in this. And I really remember there were some members, some like older youth than me, who were just really great role models. Sort of when I was having that thing of going, I really want to live a life that's modeled after Jesus, and that am really on fire for him all the time. There were older guys in the youth who I could see doing that, and who were willing to answer questions when I had questions, and they a real encouragement to follow their example. Almost.
Great, thank you, that's great. So obviously you're in Wales, you're now back in Garstang. So how did that happen? Like, how did God lead you back here? What made you make that step?
Yeah, a big part was finding out we were having twins, because we knew where we were in Wales. It was, over an hour to the nearest hospital. It was, 45 minutes to the nearest shop that wasn't just a little co-op. And so we knew if we're gonna have twins, we really need a job that isn't as physically demanding, and we need to be closer to either my family or Rachel's family. So we were kind of splitting it between, we'll either maybe move back into the Garstang-ish area, or we'll go up to Scotland. And I've got to say, I initially was in the camp of, well, I've already been to Garstang, so let's go to Scotland, because I know Garstang. And, do we really want to go back? And, no, I think I was excited by the thought of something new, is all it was. But we were examining both and having a look, and I had seen that the church was advertising this position before we knew we were pregnant, before we knew we were having twins, and I'd seen it sort of in a church communication, or perhaps Ben and Lois had told me about it, and I thought, oh, that sounds like a great job. Like, that's the sort of thing that'd be right up my alley. Shame I'm not looking for a job at the moment. And that was that. And anyway, when we were again looking at, okay, well, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? I was still a church member here, and so I was still getting all of the emails from Katie, and apologies to Katie. In the 3 years I was in Wales, I never opened a single one of them. Because I saw them come in, and I thought, oh, it's Garstang Church. But am I going to sit and read through the notices, because I'm, 3 hours away? Yeah. And just as a complete fluke of I'm not sure what, I just one day opened one of the church notice emails, and it said in it, we've advertised this job and got to the interview stage, but it's been unsuccessful, and we're going to sort of try and figure out what the next steps are with that. And I remember I read that and then immediately sent you an email pretty much going, oh, I'd quite like to do it, if it's still going. And yeah, obviously it then went to interviews and all the proper channels and that sort of thing. So, but there was some other stuff with us finding a house here that fell into place really miraculously, really, in a way that we never could have made happen ourselves. And so we moved here, I think 2 weeks before my interview, just with that assurance, I suppose, from the Lord that we should be coming to Garstang. And that might be for this church job, or it might be for something else, but there was sort of too much prompting for us to ignore that as it was. So, and then all worked out. I begged enough and they gave me the job, so...
You didn't need to beg, Jacob. He was fine. Okay, so what was it about the role then in particular that drew you to that?
I think a big part was just my own history with youth work and how much it had played a role in keeping me going in my faith through teenage years and that sort of thing. And so I really wanted to kind of be able to provide that for other people and be involved in that sort of thing. And I'd been working with kids and families and all of that where I was before, and I loved doing that. I loved getting to know people and I don't know, I suppose helping push them a bit outside their comfort zone with admittedly very different stuff than I now do. But I really love that, and so the idea of being able to do the same thing here in a church that I loved, in a children's work that I'd been a part of helping out with before I left, and so I already really loved that, and I knew it was a church that was super invested in their kids' work and what's going on in that sort of stuff. So it really it just spoke to me. It was just an instant sort of, I should put myself in for that. I don't know is Pete Blundell here? No. That's fine, I'll talk about him anyway. When I moved back from Florida, I didn't particularly want to. I think 9 years there, I'd sort of started to settle, and I didn't want to, as a 16-year-old, start fresh somewhere new. And so, I was quite closed off, and I, we would come to youth, but the way they did it back then was they'd do a message at the start, and then they'd kind of play games and all that afterwards. And so I would come for the message part, and then I'd walk home, because I wasn't interested, and I was almost kind of just going because, Mum and Dad wanted us to go to a youth group, as it were. I just wasn't very happy. And Pete, I've got to say, did a lot of sort of encouraging me to get involved with stuff, and he had a Bible study that he was running, and so he was inviting me along to that a lot and pestering me, so I went, and it was great. And looking back, once I was out of that sort of mindset that I had been in when I first arrived, and I was again sort of going to church because I was wanting to myself, I could have very easily fallen away in that period had Pete not been as proactive as he was. So I think, again, in terms of the role, I had sort of seen how important that was for me. And I thought, I know there's already lots of people in the church doing that for lots of young people anyway, but if I can even just be marginally involved in helping someone in that way, I wanted to do it.
That's great. So you shared a little bit on Thursday night about the role. So not that you need to go into too much detail, but maybe just for anybody who's not familiar with what the role involves, then just a little bit about the role, kind of maybe what you have been doing and how you see things going forward.
Sure. So a big part of my role is the children's director post. So I help organise all of the all-age services that we have here when things are a bit different. All of the kids' events, holiday club, light party, all of those sort of things. I help make them happen. I'm in the office during the week, so I can get almost the busy work bits done, which frees up volunteers to do more of the other bits, I suppose. And so then, as part of that, I'm going into Kids Club and Connect and supporting them, doing talks, organising games, just being around, getting to know the kids, getting to know some of the parents as they come and pick up and drop off and that sort of thing. I suppose being the person who has, a little bit of influence in all of it to hopefully help bring it all together a bit. And then as part of the job role, with families as well. So, looking at how can we better integrate families into what we already do, what new things can we offer which might help families who are sort of on the periphery of church, come to Todd Lynn, that sort of thing, but maybe don't come to other stuff. What are their needs that we as a church can fill? So,
That's great. And there's obviously more to it than that, but that's a really good insight. So is there a scripture or something that God's maybe spoken to you recently that has encouraged or challenged you in some way?
Yes, there is. It was Psalm 127, which is only a short one. It's only 5 verses, but I'd heard the first 2 verses a lot And it was only really when I saw the other ones that I'm going to read it, if that's okay.
Okay, go for it.
It says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward, like arrows in the hand of a warrior, like the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate." I think for me, I do sometimes tend to be a bit of a worrier. And so those first two verses I'd always heard and tried to remind myself of that thing of, it isn't so much our over effort that makes something happen, but it's when God's involved that things happen. But when I read all of it, I was looking at different things, and apparently in the Hebrew, there's a lot of wordplay between the word build and the word son and the word daughter, and so the whole psalm is almost a thing about kids and young people, and looking at how the second part talks about them being like arrows. Arrows are fashioned; they're made. You don't just naturally find arrows lying around. There's a work that goes into forming them into arrows, and so it's for me at least, and thinking about the church as a whole, it's an encouragement to us as a church that sure, the work that we put into the kids' work is very important, and there's lots of volunteers that do lots of really great stuff. But it's God being involved in it that is really what brings it together. And then that last part of, blessed is the man who fills his quiver with these arrows of these young people that the church has shaped and formed. You won't be put to shame when you speak with your enemies in the gate, and this idea that, as a church, if we're putting a lot of prayer and coming to God and asking him to be involved in our kids' work, and we're putting in our own effort, and obviously the young people themselves, they're really giving themselves to God and asking God to be a part of their life, then they aren't just young people in the church, but actually, when enemies come to the gate, when things happen to the church, they're an active part in standing firm. So it was a interesting thing recently where I took two verses which I'd often repeated to myself and then read the whole thing and found, actually that's even more relevant than I thought.
I've never seen that in that psalm before, so that's excellent. Thank you. Yeah. So the guys are going to come and lead us in a song in a moment, and it would be good to pray for the children's work. Jacob also supports Ben and Lois, who do a great job with the youth work, and that's thriving and growing, and Rooted actually meeting this evening as well. So it'd be good to pray for the children's and the youth work all together. And so I'm giving you that heads up now. So it'd be good if one or two would lead us in prayer after we've sung this song. Let's thank you, Jacob, for sharing. And if anybody has any questions, would like to know more about Jacob's role or thoughts, then I'm sure Jacob would love to chat to you afterwards. That's great. Thank you.